I'm Kelly Rickert with Mitsubishi Electric, Automotive America. Today we are demonstrating the FlexConnect driver distraction mitigation technology that we have. This is a 2022 Cadillac Escalade. We have a number of sensors here running off a Qualcomm 8295 SoC. We're also utilizing BlackBerry's QNX and Ivy software platforms. So one of the things that stands out right away here is our driver monitoring camera. This is a 2 megapixel NIR for monitoring the driver, mounted on the steering column. We also have two 5 megapixel RGB IR cameras. You'll see one here in the overhead console, and there's a second one in a similar position overlooking the second row, as well two 60 gigahertz millimeter wave radars. And that would be behind this shield here, and a second run in the second row position. So the focus of the demo is really to mitigate driver distraction, grab the necessary information to monitor driver awareness, but at the same time feed information back to the driver in the minimal format to alert the driver, but not necessarily add additional distractions. Starting off with driver monitoring. So you can see here our 2 megapixel NIR capturing the face, so you see the green box identifying the driver. I actually have not recorded myself here, so I'm showing up as a guest. But some of the information that we can gather, things like smoking detection. So if I am smoking, you can see that we're seeing this. Cell phone usage. Let me pull my phone out of my pocket here. That I'm talking on my phone. Things like drowsiness. And if we give the system a few seconds more to calibrate, we can also detect the heart rate through the NIR camera. And that is something that's a proprietary technology we've developed where we can bounce the infrared light off of the bloodstream. And depending on the amount of hemoglobin passing through the blood vessel at a given time, we're reflecting and absorbing some portion of that light. And so that reflected value is being read in a luminance. That luminance is going to change depending on the heart rate. And if you see here, I'm coming in at about low 60 BPM right now. We have the ability to be plus or minus 5 beats per second accurate, which is compatible or equivalent to the best wearable smartwatches that you could get on the market today. All of this has been developed with medical university partnerships, using ECGs as kind of our ground truth for training. We can also use the 60 gigahertz millimeter wave radar to do breathing detection. As well, we have the capability to use the camera for the same breathing detection. So a couple different methods possible there. You'll notice in the gaze menu here that the camera can detect where my gaze direction is, where I'm looking. So of course right here I would, driving down the road, want to be looking at the road. But if I'm looking away for too long, I'm going to get a higher percentage in these other fields of view. And over time, if I'm doing that for too long, that's going to show up as a distraction to the system. And I'll show you a little bit later some of the things that we can do with that information. Of course, right now there's a bit of pushback from consumer adoption about adding cameras into the vehicles, but we've also come up with some other unique ways where we can utilize different sensors, for example thermal sensors, that could potentially give us a minimal amount of information without being so intrusive on the driver. So things like, are my hands on the wheel when I'm driving in let's say a level 2+ vehicle system. So obviously you cannot see my face. You can detect that there's an occupant there. My hands are on the wheel, or my hands will be off the wheel. So again, just another alternative, utilizing some different sensor technologies that we can gather some of this information about the driver. Moving into occupant monitoring. We're seeing here the 60 gigahertz millimeter wave radar. What that's doing is picking up a point cloud. So you're seeing the two passengers point clouds here, which really is just the motion that millimeter wave radar is able to pick up. And then depending on the size of that point cloud, we're able to do body size estimation, really to determine if it's an adult or a child. Today, the regulations are driving this technology into the vehicles for Child Left Behind Acts globally. Here in the US, that started as the Hot Cars Act. Essentially what we want to do is determine if a child's left in the vehicle, prompt the vehicle to make some sort of alert. Of course, that will be based on the OEM's consumer strategy, but really at the end of the day trying to save lives by avoiding children being left into hot cars. We could also capture some of this information, record this data if necessary. We could plot this data over time. And some of this sensor information is also being looked at by certain companies that may want to create profiles long-term on the vehicle and the usage for, let's say, insurance purposes or creating driver profiles, for example. Likewise, we've got the thermal cameras that I mentioned before that could also be pointed at the passengers. So again, minimally invasive. I can detect an occupant's there. I don't necessarily have a good view of their face where they might be concerned about their privacy. So here we're showing the two sensors looking at the front seat passengers. We've also located two of these thermal camera sensors in the second row. So of course you can see the second row passenger here. If we go back to the cameras, so the 5 megapixel RGB IR cameras, front row passengers, I can detect both passengers with the same camera. You can see the green box is doing facial ID, and I can do the similar situation in the back. Now you're seeing here we also have the ability to do seatbelt detection, so the passenger is not wearing their seatbelt. One thing that could help is using the cameras, if the sensor is already going to be there, to eliminate some hardware that we may have in the vehicles today, for example, weight sensors in those seats. So kind of grabbing all of this information, we want to utilize this again to mitigate driver distraction. And so all of these sensors are creating the data. What we try to also do is incorporate or integrate that data into with our experience in driver monitoring and again safe driving, and bring that together to try to offer opportunities where we can improve. So our team has come up with what we call our distraction meter. This is really kind of an intuitive way that we can articulate the information that's being gathered. So a few things you're seeing here: gaze distraction. I have a very high score for gaze distraction because I have not been looking forward at the road. I've been obviously looking towards you, talking about this demo. As well, passenger interaction. So our microphone array in the vehicle is detecting that I'm talking. We're interacting with the passengers, so I have a very high distraction score for passenger interaction. You can see the thermal camera, which I mentioned earlier, which could detect if my hands are on the wheel. Obviously my hands are not on the wheel other than real quick during that portion. So you see I have a high score for that. Bringing all of this information together, what could we do with this to help the driver mitigate distractions? So a few examples, you saw earlier that we can detect drowsiness with the driver monitoring camera. Knowing the location of my vehicle and that possibly there's a coffee shop coming up ahead. Maybe the vehicle would recommend to the passenger that there's a Starbucks ahead. You should pull off. You've been drowsy for this period of time, and get a coffee to try to wake up. One thing that I really like about that use case is we've seen the OEMs, most all of them globally, announcing their future revenue increases through software as a service. I think this could be a really easy one where these corporate partners would definitely want to be in these vehicles, and maybe if I'm sharing some information to them, they're offering me a reduced coupon on purchase of a coffee or something like that. Other things that we could do is possibly offer to change the music or turn on music. Over time, we could build these driver profiles knowing what safe driving behavior what music was playing during the safe driving behavior periods, maybe recommend something like that, maybe recommend a favorite song. And then some other ideas we've had is, of course, this is a little bit exaggerated with the bright light, but possibly we want to change the mood. So think about, a candlelight dinner, kind of setting the mood in the vehicle, and possibly, arousing the driver, or maybe even calming the driver, giving some ambient lighting conditions that would be conducive to a more safe drive. At the same time, on the back end of this, again, we're grabbing all of this information. So from here, you can see kind of all of this data being charted together. You can see the various color legends for what these lines are representing. But let's say in the event of an accident or some sort of emergency situation, we have, of course, all of this data available to us. Possibly we want to record or capture, and this isn't going to show me yet because I haven't had an event, but I could see what the state of the occupants in the vehicle were, let's say post-crash analysis. Of course, we see that would be beneficial for insurance companies, of course, but just like we see with drivers and aftermarket dash cams, being able to have that data when you're trying to fight a lawsuit, for example, or work on an insurance claim could be very helpful in determining what the state of, again, the occupants and the driver were prior to or leading up to that event. A few other things that we've added to our demo here. So we've partnered with TomTom on a map layer here, and we've developed our own kind of smart assistant. So again, trying to mitigate distractions to the driver. Right now we're kind of preset in downtown Detroit. So a hypothetical situation here, maybe we just finished lunch in downtown Detroit. We're going to head to the Red Wings game at Little Caesars Arena, but beforehand we want to grab some gas so we don't have to stop after the game, and maybe grab a coffee really quick before we get there. So hey, FlexConnect, take me to a gas station, and then Starbucks, and then Little Caesars Arena. So based on our GPS location in Detroit, it's going to recommend a gas station along the route. We'll then stop at a Starbucks and eventually end at our destination, Little Caesars Arena, for the hockey game. Now, the system is smart enough to realize that we're going to need parking once we get to the Little Caesars Arena. And so it's asking us if we're interested in reserving a spot ahead of time. So possibly while we're at the gas station filling up, or maybe the Starbucks, we could go ahead and reserve our parking. It's going to give us some different options here of parking structures that are available nearby. I could go ahead and pre-reserve my parking before I get there. Again, trying to help mitigate some distractions. I'll set my time here, hit continue. Of course, the driver monitoring camera can get facial identification, so I can know the driver and possibly have my payment information saved with my driver profile. So I could go ahead and confirm my payment, pay for my parking, and then ultimately navigate. Okay, so some of the other things that we've added here, again, to mitigate distraction, we have our far left screen, which allows us to switch between some preset screen displays. So easily hitting here with one touch minimalist display. You see the driver's screen is now reduced the information that's coming to the driver. We're showing just the time and the vehicle. So this is an example of a contactless entry using the rear view camera. We can have facial recognition to identify the vehicle's driver, and then with password gesture control, offer contactless entry to things like opening the trunk, possibly unlocking the door, maybe letting the vehicle know the driver is going to enter, and we can go to their preset default settings, things like seat position, mirror position, and so forth. One thing this benefits the OEMs is eliminating some current hardware, for example, a foot sensor that might be under the bumper in some vehicles today, and then again, making it a little easier entry for the driver themselves.